The first crow arrived on the second day. It perched on the edge of the well, its onyx eyes gleaming like polished stones amidst the overgrown weeds. Not an unusual sight in the country, but this one felt different. It cocked its head, a slow, deliberate movement, as if studying me. A shiver crawled down my spine, a prickle of unease that had nothing to do with the bird itself. It was the way it watched, the unsettling intelligence in those black eyes. Later that day, while clearing debris from the overgrown garden, I unearthed a tarnished silver locket, half buried in the earth. It was cold in my hand, strangely devoid of the warmth the sun had baked into the soil. A single word was engraved on its surface: forever. Curiosity, or perhaps a morbid fascination, compelled me to pry it open. Inside, two faded photographs stared back at me. One was of a young woman, her features barely discernible, a melancholic smile gracing her lips. The other was of a young man, his eyes shadowed, a haunted look in their depths. I didn't recognize either of them, yet something about their faces tugged at the corners of my memory, like a half-forgotten dream. That night, the hum returned, weaving its way into my dreams. This time, it wasn't my grandmother's voice I heard, but a chorus of whispers, too faint to decipher, swirling around me like dead leaves caught in a whirlwind. They spoke of longing, of despair, of a love twisted into something dark and hungry. I woke with a gasp, the sheets tangled around my legs, a cold sweat clinging to my skin. The room was still, the only sound the incessant tick-tock of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. But the air thrummed with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer alone in the house. The mornings, however, held a fragile peace. Sunlight, filtering through the dusty windows, painted the rooms in a soft, almost forgiving light. I told myself it was the sunlight, the fresh air, the steady rhythm of work that calmed the unsettling whispers at the edge of my mind. Maybe it was just the house settling, I'd think, as I tore down rotting wallpaper or pried loose another stubborn floorboard. Even haunted houses had to obey the laws of physics, didn't they? Days melted into weeks, each one a battle against the relentless decay. I told myself I was starting to enjoy the solitude, the quiet satisfaction of bringing order to chaos. But the truth was, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched, evaluated. The townsfolk, with their knowing glances and hushed whispers, didn't help. They'd offer platitudes, condolences on my grandmother's passing, but their eyes held a different story, one tinged with a fear I couldn't quite place. I brushed off their warnings, told myself they were just superstitious locals peddling ghost stories for their own amusement. But the dreams were harder to ignore. They always started the same way, a warm melody, like a lullaby from my childhood, drawing me in, lulling me into a false sense of security. Then the melody would twist, sour, become a discordant symphony of whispers, each one a fingernail dragging down a chalkboard. I'd see glimpses of her, the woman from the locket, her face always obscured, just out of reach. And always, that single chilling word, echoing in the darkness, ask. It happened on a Friday, a day that dawned like any other, the air thick with the smell of approaching rain. I was in the attic, sunlight filtering through the grime-coated window panes, illuminating dust motes dancing in the still air. The attic was a graveyard of forgotten things, a chipped porcelain doll staring blankly from the corner, a moth-eaten tapestry draped over a rusted birdcage, a rocking horse frozen mid-gallop, its chipped paint a reminder of laughter long faded. I was shifting a stack of mildewed photo albums when the floorboards groaned beneath me, a low, guttural sound that seemed to come from the belly of the house. I paused, listening, heart thudding against my ribs. Silence, thick and heavy, pressed down, amplifying the rasp of my own breath. Probably just the wind, I told myself, resuming my task. But as I lifted a heavy trunk, its brass hinges shrieking in protest, a voice, low and guttural, slithered from the shadows beneath the eaves. Curiosity, it hissed, such a dangerous thing. I whirled around, dropping the trunk with a thud that sent vibrations through the floorboards. My pulse roared in my ears, adrenaline flooding my system, but there was no one there. Just the shadows, deeper now, gathering in the corners like wary predators. A cold sweat prickled my skin. Had I imagined it? A trick of the light, a manifestation of the anxieties gnawing at the edges of my mind. I told myself it was nothing, just the house playing tricks on me. But the voice, it had felt close, too close. As I backed slowly toward the attic door, the air grew thick, oppressive, charged with an unseen energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The shadows seemed to deepen, pulse, a subtle shift that sent a jolt of primal fear through me. Whatever was in this house with me, it was no longer content to stay hidden. That voice in the attic clawed at my peace of mind. I had tried to write it off as the house groaning, old timbers settling under the weight of time and neglect. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had spoken directly to me, warned me maybe. The unsettling encounter fueled a growing obsession with the hidden room. It felt like a rotten tooth, a festering thing that needed to be pulled before it poisoned the whole house. I couldn't bring myself to stay away. The ticking of the grandfather clock drew me in. Each clang of the pendulum a hammer blow against my already frayed nerves. One afternoon, unable to resist the pull any longer, I found myself standing before the locked door. The keyhole was choked with rust, the brass dull and cold beneath my fingers. I dug a small penknife from my pocket and, after a few moments of clumsy work, managed to pick the lock. The hinges groaned, a long, mournful sigh that sent a shiver down my spine. The room was just as I'd left it, the air thick with dust and the scent of lavender, but the silence was different now, heavier, expectant. I moved cautiously, drawn to the grandfather clock. Its face was cracked, the once ornate hands frozen in place. As I leaned closer, I noticed something etched into the dusty glass. A series of numbers, barely visible beneath the grime. They looked familiar, like a date, maybe. Though I hide a date on a clock face. I traced the numbers with my fingertip, a cold tingle shooting up my arm. 1888. It meant nothing to me. Frustration warred with unease. I ran my hand over the smooth surface of the clock, searching for some other clue, some hidden mechanism. As my fingers brushed against the back, the clock chimed. One single, bone-jarring clang that reverberated through the room. The floor beneath me seemed to tilt, the air growing thin and cold. Panic welled in my chest, a choking sensation that had nothing to do with the dust clogging my lungs. I had the sudden, terrifying certainty that I was no longer alone in the room, and that something unseen was watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. The grandfather clock hissed, its single chime echoing into a silence that felt absolute, suffocating. I stumbled back, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The air, moments ago thick with dust and the cloying scent of lavender, turned sharp, metallic, like the taste of fear itself. The hairs on my arms stood on end, pulled by an unseen force. And then, it began. A low hum, barely audible at first, vibrated through the floorboards, snaking up my legs, wrapping around me like icy tendrils. It wasn't the melodic hum from before. This was different, darker, hungry. The dust motes in the air, caught in a ray of fading sunlight, began to swirl, faster and faster, forming a vortex of motes and shadows that seemed to coalesce around the grandfather clock. Then, a shape began to emerge from the swirling darkness. At first, it was just a suggestion of form, a distortion of light and shadow. But as the hum intensified, the shape solidified, resolving itself into the outline of a woman. My breath hitched in my throat, a strangled cry trapped in my chest. It couldn't be. Not here. Not now. But even as my rational mind screamed its denial, I knew, with a sinking certainty, that it was her. Emily. But not the Emily I remembered. This Emily, this thing, was all sharp edges and hollowed out spaces. Her skin, once tanned and freckled, was the color of parchment, stretched taut over bones that seemed to push against the fabric of her simple cotton dress. Her hair, once a cascade of auburn waves, hung in lank, greasy strands around a face that was both familiar and grotesquely wrong. Her eyes, wide and vacant, stared through me, two black pits in a landscape of decay. And then, She smiled. Consciousness returned in agonizing waves, each one pulling me further into a waking nightmare. The darkness remained, but it was no longer a peaceful oblivion. This was a darkness filled with whispers, with the rustle of unseen things, with a cold that seeped into my bones and settled there like lead. I was trapped, bound by an unseen force, my limbs heavy, my struggles met with a chilling indifference. A voice, raspy and cold, slithered through the darkness, wrapping around me like a shroud. It spoke of bargains and betrayals, of souls ground to dust in the mill of the house's hunger. It whispered of Emily, but the name, once a balm to my soul, was now a blade twisted deep. It showed me glimpses, fleeting and horrifying. Emily, her eyes vacant, her smile a grotesque parody, drifting through the halls of the house, a spectral prisoner in a decaying palace. I saw her face, contorted in a silent scream, pressed against the grime-coated window of the attic, reaching for me, her touch a promise of icy oblivion. And the laughter. God, the laughter. It started low, a guttural rumble that seemed to emanate from the very walls, growing in intensity until it was a cacophony of madness that threatened to shatter my eardrums, my sanity. It was the laughter of the house, glutted on despair, drunk on my broken heart. I thrashed against my bonds, screamed until my throat was raw, but it was no use. I was a fly caught in a spider's web, my struggles only tightening the silken strands that held me captive. The house, the entity, whatever dark force held sway over this cursed place, had won. I was its now, body and soul. And the worst of it, the very worst of it, was the chilling certainty that it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. A low groan, like the earth shifting in its sleep, echoed through the darkness. I opened my eyes, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A sliver of gray light pierced the gloom, revealing the outline of the hidden room. The grandfather clock ticking with a sickeningly cheerful cadence. I was back. Relief, sweet and heady, washed over me. It had been a dream, a nightmare. The house, the voice, Emily's vacant eyes, all just figments of a mind strained to its breaking point. I pushed myself up, my muscles aching, stiff from what? How long I'd been trapped in that void. I looked around the room, searching for some confirmation that I was truly back in the land of the living. My gaze fell on my grandmother's diary, lying open on the floor where it had fallen. I reached for it, my fingers tracing the spidery lines of her final entry. The house always collects. The words seemed to throb on the page, a chilling premonition that sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I had to get out of this house, this town, run as far away as I could and never look back. Then I heard it, a soft sob, coming from the far corner of the room, a sound so filled with despair, so utterly heartbroken, that it stopped my breath. I turned slowly, my blood turning to ice. Emily. She was huddled on the floor, her back to me, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Her hair, no longer a greasy, matted mess, cascaded down her back in auburn waves, catching the sliver of light from the window. Relief, so potent it was almost painful, flooded through me. She was all right. She was real. Emily? I whispered, my voice hoarse with disbelief, with hope. She didn't turn. I took a step toward her, my hand outstretched, and then I saw it. Lying on the floor beside her, glinting dully in the pale light, was a tarnished silver locket. The locket from the garden. The locket with the photographs. Emily slowly raised her head, her movements jerky, unnatural, and turned to face me. The face that stared back at me was not the face of the woman I loved. It was my grandmother's face. The creature, a grotesque mockery of Emily, stood frozen, a statue sculpted from ice and malice. But the rage radiating off it was a living thing, a furnace stoking the shadows that writhed around us. Its eyes, two black pits in the decaying canvas of its face, locked onto mine, burning with an unholy fire. You think you can defy me? It hissed, voice a chorus of whispers, each one a razor blade dragging across bone. You belong to this house now, just like her. It gestured with a hand that was all bone and sinew, the movement jerky. marionette-like. A wave of cold, so intense it felt like a physical blow, slammed into me. The floor buckled beneath my feet, the shadows around us churning with the forms of the house's other victims. Their silent screams tore through me, a symphony of despair, orchestrated by the entity that held us all captive. But I clung to my defiance like a life raft in a stormy sea. "You need me," I rasped, voice raw, the words tasting of fear and desperation. "You feed on broken promises, on the agony of what could have been. You need my wish to survive." The creature cocked its head, a grotesque parody of Emily's playful curiosity. But behind that mockery, I saw fear, a flicker of uncertainty in those abyss-like eyes. "I take back my wish," I roared, pouring every ounce of grief, every shattered shard of my soul into the words. The room erupted. The temperature plummeted, frost spreading across the walls like a malevolent vine. The grandfather clock shuddered, its pendulum swinging wildly as if trying to break free from its prison of glass and wood. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure primal rage that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. The shadows recoiled, their edges sizzling as if doused with holy water. The air crackled with an energy so intense it felt like my bones were about to ignite. And in that moment, I knew with a terrifying certainty that I had woken something up. Something ancient, something powerful, something that terrified even the entity that wore Emily's stolen face. The echoes of the creature's scream, and that otherworldly roar that seemed to answer it, faded into an unsettling silence. The air, moments ago crackling with energy, felt flat, stale, like the air in a tomb sealed for centuries. The shadows that had recoiled from me now clung to the edges of the room, wary, watchful. My legs buckled, and I slumped against the wall, my back scraping against rough plaster. A cold sweat clung to me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The room, bathed in the faint gray light filtering through the grime-coated window, seemed both familiar and alien, as if I were seeing it for the first time, through a lens clouded with something dark and unknowable. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, each swing of the pendulum, a metronome marking the passing of time in this place where time itself felt broken. I looked at the spot where the creature had stood, where Emily's stolen face had contorted in a mask of rage and fear, but there was nothing there, just the faint scent of lavender, a lingering trace of the house's twisted game. A wave of exhaustion, so profound it felt like a physical weight, settled over me. I pushed myself to my feet, every muscle screaming in protest. My gaze fell on my grandmother's diary, still lying open on the floor. I picked it up, the leather cool and smooth against my clammy skin. The words of her final entry seemed to burn into my retinas. But sometimes, it gives something back. A chance, a choice, a choice. What choice did I have now? I closed the diary, the sound loud in the stillness of the room. The house had shown me its true face, the depths of its darkness. I had stared into the abyss, and the abyss had stared back. And in that exchange, something had shifted. Inside me, inside the house, a cold wind, smelling of damp earth and decay, snaked through the room, rustling the pages of the diary in my hand. The grandfather clock chimed once, the sound unnaturally loud, a sharp punctuation mark in the silence. The house had given me a reprieve, not a pardon. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken threats, of promises whispered on the wind. The first rays of dawn, pale and watery, slanted through the grime-coated windows, painting the room in shades of gray and dust. I sat there, amidst the ruins of my sanity, long after the grandfather clock had chimed its final, ominous note. The silence was absolute, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet of a house asleep. It was the silence of a predator after the kill, sated but vigilant, its gaze fixed on its prey. I knew then that I hadn't escaped. Not really. The house was in me now, woven into the fabric of my being, its darkness a counterpoint to the rhythm of my heart. I could feel it, a constant presence at the edge of my awareness, like a spider patiently spinning its web around my soul. I walked out of the hidden room, out of that house, and I kept walking. Didn't look back, didn't dare to. The world outside those walls felt alien. The colors too bright, the sounds too sharp. Even the sun felt wrong, its warmth a distant memory. I shed my past like a snakeskin, changed my name, drifted from town to town, seeking solace in anonymity, in the humdrum routines of a life stripped bare. But there was no outrunning the darkness that clung to me. The dreams followed me. Emily. Her face a shifting mask of beauty and decay, her voice a hollow echo whispering my name. The grandfather clock, its chimes echoing in the caverns of my mind, marking the passage of time in a place where time had no meaning. And the house, I saw it everywhere. In the shadows cast by streetlights, in the reflections in shop windows, in the faces of strangers passing by. Always there, a silent reminder of what I'd done, of what I'd unleashed. Years passed, or maybe it was decades. Time lost all meaning. The world moved on, but I remained frozen. A solitary figure trapped in amber. The echoes of the house's laughter, a constant hum beneath the surface of my reality. Until one day, I saw a news report. A fire. A small town in Maine. An old Victorian house, consumed by flames, its secrets turning to ash beneath a sky choked with smoke. And for the first time in years, I felt something other than the cold, dead weight of the house's presence. Hope. Not for myself. It was too late for that. But maybe, just maybe, the fire had consumed the darkness, had freed the souls the house had claimed. Maybe now, Emily could finally rest.